rehashed and retold so many times that it is so hard to get to the root story that I'm just gonna tell kind of the commingled version, which is what you see on a lot of the places that you read about it. Come to think of it, that's kind of seems to be the version of the story that we tell a lot.
The commingled version?
Yeah.
Yeah, the ones that are all just full of all kinds of fun stuff.
Yep, all the fun
made
stuff.
up and tacked on. Yeah.
Yep. So we're just gonna go with every little bit that is on here to tell this story today. According to the lore, the Black Knight satellite was first discovered by none other than Nikola Tesla.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yep. The one of the granddaddies of science.
The granddaddy.
Is he the granddaddy?
In my book.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think there's older granddaddies, but Tesla did some amazing stuff.
He did some amazing stuff.
He's the hottest of the granddaddies.
I'm not even going to go there.
Sorry.
Thought about that.
In 1899, Tesla was using a high voltage radio receiver. I believe
receiver
is what you would be using.
Yeah.
And it was a 200-foot tower. I think he was in Colorado. He'd gotten funding by one of his major backers to build this thing, but he was picking up unusual transmissions, which he believed had to be intelligent because they were very consistent. They were repeating patterns, and he evidently thought that they were likely to be extraterrestrial. I know that he thought that they were intelligent, but I've also seen that it was said that he believed they were extraterrestrial.
Sure. It was coming from space.
It was coming from space.
Maybe.
Actually, that's left.
It was coming from space.
It was coming from space.
Yeah.
Later, when we move, and this story's going to do this a bunch, we're going to do a bunch of skips in time. We're going to skip forward to the 1920s. Unusual transmissions began being picked up by ham radio operators. And they were obviously earthly in origin, because they were transmissions coming from Earth, but they were weird and they shouldn't have been picked up where and when they were picked up.
Okay.
These are something that at the time no one understood, and today we don't really know what they are or what causes them, but they're what are referred to as LDEs, which stands for long delay echoes. And people have attributed this to the Black Knight satellite.
We talked about that a little bit during Lost Boy Larry, didn't we?
Skipping.
Yeah, skipping.
Yeah.
Skipping. It's a similar phenomena to skipping.
Yeah. So, essentially, I guess what they're saying then is that the Black Knight satellite picked up these transmissions
And bounced them back to us for some reason. Rebroadcasted.
Yeah, rebroadcast. It didn't just echo off the satellite, but it actually absorbed it, recorded it, retransmitted it back down at different intervals.
At a delay.
Yeah,
yes.
kind of delay. The delay was not consistent, though, if I understand correctly.
No, it is not a consistent delay. It can I think it's anywhere from 6 to 30 to 30 seconds to sometimes up to a minute or so. It's really inconsistent. It's really weird.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
We're going to move forward again to 1954.
Okay.
And according to the story, the U.S. government released information that they had detected 2 satellites that were in a polar orbit. First, you need to understand that we, and by we, I mean the human race.
Not us, specifically Team Sideways.
Not Team Sideways.
Yes, not Team Sideways, but the actual human race had not yet developed the capability to put a satellite into orbit. That wouldn't happen until October 4th of 1957 when Sputnik was put into orbit. So we hadn't launched a satellite at all.
I guess we should clarify also that satellite can mean anything that's orbiting, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's of...
Yeah, the moon is a satellite.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
anything that is intentionally orbiting the Earth.
So it doesn't necessarily mean it was mechanical or anything like that.
True.
Right.
Very true.
Okay.
The other thing to keep in mind is that it says that there were 2 satellites at the time in a polar orbit. And I want to talk about a polar orbit real quick so that people know what this is, because this is important.
Yeah.
Most satellites are in an equatorial or semi-equatorial orbit. That means that they're going around the equator.
Yeah.
And most people do satellites even today that way because it's easier. Because when a rocket is launched, you use the inertia of the Earth to propel it
Well, not-
in that direction.
Yeah, not the inertia, but the speed, the
speed.
rotation.
Thank you. Rotation is what I was
the rotation
after.
of the Earth, yeah.
But it helps with it, yeah. So it gets it going.
Yeah, that's why most of them are west to east.
Yeah.
There's only a few that are east to west.
Correct.
There are some, but
But the thing is going in the opposite direction, or even more so, going in a polar orbit is hard because you've got to negate all of that speed that you picked up on launch, and then get something to rotate over each of the poles. So instead of going around the equator, we're rotate at 90 degrees. Now you're going over both the poles.
So instead of going east-west or west-east, they're going north-south or south-north.
yeah,
Correct.
exactly. And
That's a very good way to put it.
And and what you do for that is you just launch from a more northerly launch point. That also helps a lot. But yeah, it's not tremendously unusual. I mean, a lot of survey and spy satellites have polar orbits because that's a great way to cover the entire surface of the planet in a very short amount of
Yeah,
time.
that's the upside of the polar orbit is you're circling around the poles while the Earth is circling around underneath you, so you can take images of the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, lots of survey satellites and stuff like that use the polar
But
orbit.
that's perhaps newer.
That's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously our earliest launches were just west to east.
Yeah, and the first satellite, and I use that with air
Man-made
quotes.
satellite.
What?
Man-made satellite?
Yes, the first man-made satellite.
Yeah.
Thank you. That we put into a polar orbit of any kind didn't happen until 1960, and this report is from 1954. So there's some strangeness there. The other thing is that, according to these reports, that satellite was transmitting radio signals that could be detected but
Nope.
couldn't be picked up.
The satellites from 1954?
Yes.
Both of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Or at least one of them.
Okay.
Again, this is where the story gets a little
Sure.
fudgy, and I don't know. But signals are being sent. They're being picked up. We don't know what they are. And then the satellites just kind of disappear, or maybe we lost track of them. I'm not positive, but there's no more reporting on it at that time.
Yeah, I'm really not sure what our tracking abilities were back in those days, because I mean, these days we have radars because obviously we want to track all the satellites that are up there. And
Yeah, at that time I don't even know how they picked them up. That's the hard part, is I don't know how these things were discovered, because I can't find it in the lore. Again, I'm going to use that phrase, all of the retellings and the stuff that I've found, and digging through it, I can't find out how it was picked up, just that it was.
yeah, so it makes you wonder.
Yeah, we're going to skip ahead a couple of years to 1957.
Okay.
There are accounts that the Black Knight satellite was photographed following Sputnik 2 by a guy named Dr. Corrales? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He's Venezuela. It happened in Venezuela, so I'm assuming that it's a name that's of some Spanish origin, but I'm terrible at pronunciations, as we all know by now. So I'm just going to go with that.
So somehow the BKS managed to swing out of its polar orbit and get behind Sputnik 2? Or?
Yeah. Evidently, it was shadowing Sputnik 2.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Intriguing.
and he took this photo of it when he was in Caracas. But again, this is another bit. It's so jumbled, it's so muddled. I can't get good details on this that's good enough to retell. So I'm just going to kind of leave it at that, as it was photographed shadowing Sputnik 2.
And no copies of the photograph exist anywhere, I take it?
I can't find them.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything. Again, we're going to skip forward in time a couple of years to 1960. At that time, the U.S. and the Russians had put successfully quite a few satellites into orbit. What you got to remember, though, is, of course, now we're in the Cold War, and this freaks the U.S. military out that, oh my God, there's satellites up there that could be, recording us or taking pictures of us.
Yeah, you got to keep track of those things.
You do, and so they put up a net, a kind of a radar net, like what you were alluding to a little bit earlier, Joe, so that they could track what came across. There was one on the eastern coast and one on the western coast, so they could track the things that came by. On February 11 of 1960, newspapers announced that an object was detected that was of unknown origins, and it was described as a dark, tumbling object that was at a 79, it's orbiting 79 degrees off the equator.
So close to a polar orbit.
Yeah, kind
Getting
of.
close
Not
to it.
exactly a true polar orbit
No, not
as
at
it
all,
was
but-
described from the 1954 report. But I don't know. But it's also said that it had an eccentric or erratic orbit, and it had an apogee of, and this is where I'm going to need your help here, Joe. So it says the apogee was 1,728 kilometers. What is that going to be in miles?
1,073.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it had a perigee of 216 kilometers.
What is?
Yeah.
What's a perigee?
So what does that? Well, what does that equate to in miles?
134.
Okay.
So yeah, perigee is the low point in the orbit. Apogee is the high point in the orbit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the easy way that I always think of it is away and apogee both start with an A, which puts perigee closer. Does that make sense?
No.
The A and the P. It's kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? It's
A mnemonic?
Mnemonic. Thank
No,
you.
it's not. But I
it's
mean-
not. But it's kind of the way I remember it. Is
Okay.
apogee's away, that puts perigee close. It's not the best thing, but that's how I
Sure.
keep it straight in my little head.
Sure.
Yeah, but now that was
1960.
1960. Now this particular orbit this is what the U.S. military reported, because I thought they reported something with a little bit not quite such an erratic orbit.
That's the difficulty here is
Yeah.
that with retellings, it's hard to pin down exactly what was talked about or reported.
I gotta say, if this is indeed an alien object that they put in orbit around the planet, they did kind of a crappy job.
Well, the thing, obviously, that I don't like talking about because I don't want to ever think about it, but, you know, the whole, like, lost cosmonaut thing is, like, 1959. So, I mean, you know, to have some weird lost space stuff in accidental orbit of the Earth isn't, you know,
It's not unheard of.
it's not unheard
Yeah,
of.
it's
I mean, we've been talking about the orbit and stuff being up there, but here's something that's weird about the orbit to me is things that are in a stable orbit have to be 222 miles or more above the Earth.
Okay.
This thing was, what was it was
134.
134
low point.
miles, which to me doesn't make sense because that seems like it would come too close. Gravity and atmosphere would drag it and slow it down and pull it back to Earth. So it's a weird orbit to
Yeah,
me.
it would take a long time for that orbit to decay, but it would eventually. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also said that, and this is talking about the size of the satellite, it's said that the object was calculated to be somewhere between 10 to 15 tons.
How?
I have no idea how that calculation
Okay.
was done,
That is
Sure.
a good question.
but that is miles and miles heavier, much, much heavier than anything we had been able to put into orbit at that time.
But I'm sure a piece of cake for the aliens.
Easy.
Yeah.
I can't get a clear bead on the size of it, and this is the part that really jumps out to me based on that weight. Is I've seen a couple of places say that it was 2 foot by 3 foot,
No.
which would put it at what 3, 6, 12 cubic feet.
It'd be a really dense little object.
Yeah, that's over a ton a cubic foot. That's freaking heavy.
I mean, there are some
There are some metals.
materials that could be like that, but it'd have to
Some-
be totally solid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, some asteroids are they're made of heavy metals, but I don't think anything that dense. That's-
And yeah, it would have to be, right? So then you run into the problem of if it is broadcasting anything, there can't also be contained within a technology to broadcast.
That we know how to make.
Well, fair. That we know how to
that
make.
we know how to make.
But
Yeah,
we know
but-
how to make everything, Steve. We're human beings.
Here's,
Have you seen Joe's basement? He makes everything down
I
there.
know.
I know, I've got a bunch of
He's-
little L's down there.
Got one of these things down there.
But here's the thing about it. If it's only 2 by 3 feet, then how did Dr. What's-His-Name in Caracas, Venezuela manage to snap
it.
a picture of it?
Yeah.
Much less see it.
Well, I don't think Sputnik was very big.
Nah, I don't. Yeah, I guess Sputnik wasn't all that big either.
And
but-
Sputnik 2 would have been the same design, just the second one shot up into space. But, I mean, the thing is that what we're going to find with this story as we go through, orbit changes, the weight changes, and the size changes. All these things change as we go, and so that's why I wanted to call it out. But if we go back to this 1960 stuff, the military, according to the story, got really interested, and they put a lot of effort into researching this mystery satellite, and they commissioned a special committee to gather information on it, and those findings have never been released.
Wow.
Nobody's
fair.
ever seen them. After...
Well, what are they hiding?
That's a good question.
Something.
Something.
After tracking this, people are saying was the Black Knight satellite in 1960 for 3 weeks, it again disappeared. But during that time, the strange transmissions, the LDEs, the long delay echoes, were being picked up. We're going to move just slightly forward in 1960 to September 3rd. There is a tracking camera at Grumman Aircraft Corporation. It was at their Long Island factory or facility, and it said that it took a photo of the Black Knight satellite. This is where things get a little hinky to me. Is people on the ground said they had been seeing it for about 2 weeks. They could make it out. It was red and glowing and moving east to west.
Wow, there it goes, changing its orbit again.
The speed was described as being about 3 times as normal, and its shape, like I talked about a minute ago, it's changed again in this. It is now about 19 feet long and weighs 32,000 pounds.
I guess my question on that, right, is that just at what point do you just say, well, obviously it's something different you guys saw?
Wouldn't you think?
You know, I think at some point you say, that doesn't sound anything like this. I don't know what your basis for claiming it's the Black Knight satellite is. It doesn't have any kind of basic...
It's never been reported to glow red. It's never been reported to move east to west.
Right. Yeah. So I think at some point on a lot of stuff like this, and I know we are inclined to do that, and I want to do it again, is just say, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That's clearly not part of the Black Knight satellite.
I'm on board. I'm inclined to throw that one out.
Oh, clearly. Yeah.
Absolutely, because going from a near polar orbit to suddenly being in an equatorial orbit, that's amazing.
Not only that, but to have changed size and color so drastically, and speed so drastically.
It's a transformer.
Yeah, it's clearly not actually that. It's not an Autobot.
Yeah, if you're moving...
It's a Decepticon.
Maybe.
Ooh. Decepticon. Yeah, if you're moving 3 times as fast, that means also you're a lot lower down. Because that's how you keep from dropping into the gravity well of the planet, is to speed up. The closer you get, the faster you have to go.
Yep, and move farther out, you can go slower.
So, this thing apparently can move itself around pretty good.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just something totally different.
Yeah, it could be. We're going to go to some more strange things that are attributed to the Black Knight satellite.
Okay.
Do either of you know who Gordon Cooper is?
Yeah.
No.
Who is he, Joe?
Mercury astronaut.
Yes,
yeah.
He was. He was on Mercury 9. For anybody who doesn't know, the Mercury program was putting men in capsules and shooting them into space, and they were circling the globe and then splashing back down into the ocean to figure out how to survive in space.
Oh, and by the way, if you want to read a good book on this subject, The Right Stuff by Tom Wolfe.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great book.
I
haven't read
remember
that?
watching the movie as a kid, but I never read the book.
Oh, you got to read the book. The book is much better.
Oh, I wouldn't be shocked by that.
Yeah, but if you want to know everything you wanted to know about the Mercury program and then some, read this book. It's awesome.
Awesome. Okay. Well, it's funny. Who was the first man in space?
It was Alan Shepard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things, Cooper's first attempted launch, they scrubbed it. He was in the cockpit. He was ready to go, and then they had to scrub it for some technical reason. But
every single launch NASA's attempted in the last 4 years.
Yeah,
they do a lot
but,
of that. Yeah.
Who was it? It was Shepard?
Yeah, Alan Shepard, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right. I can't remember, but Cooper got into the cockpit and he found a plunger from Shepard. That's because when he had gone up, evidently there was an issue with the plumbing of his toilet system. And so as a joke, he had given him a plunger to take with him into space. But that didn't actually end up going into space because that mission got scrubbed. But when Cooper finally did get into space, he orbited the Earth 22 times before he came back down.
That's cool.
On trip 15 around the globe, that's where the strangeness comes in.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. What?
Cooper reported a greenish UFO to NASA, and the people at the tracking station of NASA also saw this on his readouts and displays. And it's important to point out, Cooper wasn't afraid to report UFOs. He evidently reported a couple of UFO sightings because he was a test pilot, and he would see things and he would call it a UFO because he didn't know what it was. And
Because it was by definition an unidentified flying object.
Absolutely.
It's not what we would consider today to be a space alien ship.
Woo! Yeah, no.
No, but he would report those things, so it's credible that he would have reported this, and according to the story, it's corroborated by these I think it's up to 100 people that were in the NASA tracking station in Australia that saw it on their screens.
So in other words, the Black Knight satellite had once again changed its orbit, and now it's going west to east again?
Oh, because it was because of the Shepard incident? Well,
No, because
Cooper.
the Cooper incident.
or Cooper incident?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. At least in this writing, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was orbiting together. It just means that he saw it go past him, right?
Yeah, that's entirely possible.
So it could
Yeah,
be that
now-
it was still orbiting north-south.
Okay, so...
But it had
was
never been
by-
described as having this greenish glow that he described.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
and was
nobody
it-
had been that close to it before.
Yeah, true
Maybe.
that. Was it coming towards him or moving past him or
I don't
following
know.
behind him?
I don't know. Again, it's one of those things where the accounting of this is just so brief and it's just splashed, and then that's it. You get the flash, but you don't get any of the follow-up details. Now, some of this stuff we will be going into in more detail in the theory section. So before anybody, is screaming at us what's going on, just be aware we're going to come back to some of this stuff. But I just want to
Circle
walk
back around.
through. Yeah, we're going to have to circle back to it.
Yeah, a couple times probably.
Yeah. Another newspaper article that we have from 1969 said that the Apollo 10 astronauts, and those would be Young, Cernan, and Stafford, were the first to actually film a extraterrestrial beacon,
Okay.
which was called the Monolith.
Yeah.
It's a small version of what you saw in the movie or read about in the book 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Resurrect Dead on Jupiter. No?
Yeah, exactly.
Kubrick? No? Okay. Sorry.
Yep, no. But yeah, so it's from 2001. Like I said, the Apollo 10 crew evidently filmed it from all angles, but they were.
I did a quick Google search, and that footage doesn't exist on the internet somewhere.
I know,
which is too
surprisingly,
bad.
Yeah.
or depending on your perspective, not surprisingly.
Yeah, depending.
Yep, the first cosmonaut in space. Let's see, that was Yuri Gagarin. Is that how you would say that?
I believe that's how it's pronounced.
He sighted the monolith in '61, and then Alan Shepard, who we were talking about earlier, evidently he is supposedly had reported it as well. But I say that with a lot of hesitance. I don't know. Again, this is just the way the story is told and you see it. If we move then to 1973. Again, that's a little farther skip in time. A researcher, his name is Duncan Lunan. He decided that he wanted to try to figure out what the LDE transmissions that were being picked up meant, what the deal was.
And he did an amazing job, I must say.
He really did. He went to the records of the transmissions and he analyzed them. And what he determined was that they were from another race. And they included a star chart to, and I know I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, the Boötes, Epsilon Boötes.
I'm not sure. I just call it booties myself.
But I know Booties isn't correct.
No.
It's a double star in the Boötes constellation. It's got that, what is the little double dot over the E?
Umlaut.
Umlaut. It's got the
Umlaut.
umlaut on the second O, which makes it so hard to pronounce.
Yeah.
But here's how he figures this out is he figured this out by plotting the delay time of the signal against the order in which the echoes were received. That's what he said he did. Now, what that means, I don't have the scientific backing to explain, but basically, we're 12,600 years old.
Well, they would have had. I mean, it would be not so hard to do the math on that, right? I mean, realistically, if you can say, yeah, it's coming from that star. The science behind saying it's coming from there, notwithstanding, right? But to figure out how long it would have taken from something to get there from here.
But how he figured out the star chart, because he says it included, I don't know if it was coordinates or a star chart, but that's how he figured out what constellation and what double
so
star.
So he decrypted the alien language.
And I don't know how many light years this is from us.
A long ways.
I'd love to hear the. Are there recordings
of LDEs?
Yeah, on the internet of these specific LEDs.
LDEs? These, I don't think these ones would be out there. The ones that Lunan was looking at, because this is in 1973.
Yeah.
But LDEs still happen, and I imagine that they're on the internet. I didn't think to look to listen to them because, from what I understand, LDEs are repeats of signals from Earth.
They're just echoes.
So that's why it's a little weird to me that he found this extraterrestrial location called out. But I don't know.
I was I was pondering that too. It seems a little fantastic, but it's my one thing is that if you're a satellite and you just don't have the gumption to just broadcast the message directly to planet Earth. But you want to send a message. What a clever way to do it is to receive a radio signal and then retransmit it back, but vary the interval by which you transmit it
to
back.
Transmit a message.
And so the interval the variation in the interval contains information. That's
it's a clever way.
Yeah.
It's not bad. If we're gonna theorize for a second, I don't want to hop ahead to theories, but to just quickly theorize.
No, have at it, because we're almost there.
If we were to say that the Black Knight satellite were, for instance, an alien spaceship that was stranded or something of that nature, right? That they were not powerful enough to exit our orbit, but also didn't want to die on their entry in or whatever, trying to send a distress signal, if they're basically a dormant ship, that'd be a really good, easy, energy conserving way, is to just hold one back, to not, you wouldn't have to actually broadcast a new message or anything like that. You just can delay it a little bit. I don't know.
Well, they're still broadcasting.
Well, it makes me think.
But the computer could be doing it.
What was that?
They're all dead. Yeah.
What was that movie that came out last year? The Matthew McConaughey movie about space.
Was it Interstellar?
Interstellar, and one of the things that they do is he transmitted messages in binary code and stuff like that. I mean, that to me is in line with what you're talking about. Not exact, but it makes me think about that.
I didn't see it.
Oh,
for obvious
you should.
reasons.
It's actually pretty good. But
Really?
watch it at home
No.
so you can control the volume, because the volume on that movie is terrible.
Nope. I will not. It's a movie about people in space, Steve. You know my thing about people in space.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give Devin a DVD that says it's the movie Heathers, and I'm going to actually print on it so it says the Heathers. She'll be like, yeah, I'm going to watch Heathers. And then she's going to pop it in. It's going to be Interstellar. I'm totally going to do this to you.
And you got to program it so it disables the off button.
Yeah. That's the important part, because I will turn it off.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're a little off.
We're a little off. Let's get back to the story.
All right. So 13,000 years old. That's been up there a long time.
Yeah. Well, no, we're not going to do that right now. Let's move to the last big thing about the Black Knight satellite, which is 1998. So we're, again, skipping ahead in time. The astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour, which was going to go meet up with the International Space Station, the ISS. Or ISS.
ISS, yeah.
Sorry, I added an extra S. It's the ICE.
The ISS.
That's some other weird group. But they were going to go there because I don't remember what they were doing. At one point, they suddenly saw this strange black object out their window, and they took a bunch of high-quality photos of this black object traveling away from them. And if you go out on Google, you can find these images.
Any website that's about the Black Knight satellite has at least one of these images.
At least one, if not all.
Yeah.
And they always crop them up just so you can just see it, not everything around it. But you see a lot of it. And now, everybody's favorite time.
Theories.
Theories! Let's go into the theories. And we've talked